So this presentation is about how to set up a continuous integration and continuous delivery mechanism for your plugins on GitHub with the GitHub Action features. In this presentation, we will cover the why should I do this, the what will happen in my project, and the how can I set this up. So for the why, some of you may already know the answer, but the first reason is to ensure my plugin is never broken, obviously, with continuous integration and tests, so that you can ensure at each pull request and at each merge in your master branch that nothing is broken. And if something is broken, you have an alert. The second reason, good reason, is to provide binaries for all the platforms, so that you don't have to always manually generate your binaries for people who want some. Obviously, you don't always have the case when the plugin you're working with is a good candidate for binaries, but it can happen, and it will happen if your plugin becomes a bit big and get the attention of external users. It is always a good thing to be able to provide them binaries instead of saying to them always check the source code and build it by yourself. And the third reason is to facilitate contributions. So it's the direct consequence of the two others good reasons. If you have a plugin that is never broken, or at least you have the alerts and the automatic testing, and if you have the binaries generation mechanism, it will attract people to come in your project and to contribute in it. So that's it for the why. Now for the what. So what will happen in my project? So as I said just before, you will have automatic builds, automatic tests. A nice feature in GitHub that is called status checks that we will see just right after. You will have the history of all the builds that have been triggered. So you can go check in the past the results of past builds. You will be also able to get the generated objects from any build. So this is what is called artifacts. And you will also be able to deploy releases automatically and or manually. So just to illustrate this, what will happen in my project, I suggest we just take a quick tour. So for Sofa Python 3, what will happen if you bring the CI/CD with GitHub Actions? It's that you will have here in Actions, a new world will come alive. So this will be fulfilled with all the builds that will be triggered. So it's a bit difficult to apprehend at first, but the most important is that just you understand that this is the history of everything that has been triggered, okay? Under the Action tab. And the most interesting thing is that for each pull request, you will have the automatic status checks like this. So this is what I called here the status checks. So every time you will have a pull request on your project, those check, it can be like this, but it can be basically what you want, will automatically be triggered. So there is a direct link between the builds and the pull requests. So you can go to on the pull request and get into the build results directly from the pull request. So for example, here on this pull request, 3 builds have been triggered, 1 for each platform. And if I go into details, here you can see that I'm under the Actions tab. So I'm directly into a build result. Okay. Maybe we can also get a quick glance at how the build results are shown. So here we have the 3 builds that were triggered for this pull request that we just saw before. Okay, if you have questions, do not hesitate to interrupt me. Here, everything is collapsed. It's the steps of each build. So if I go on the Ubuntu, we have these steps. On the macOS, we have basically the same, but for macOS, and on Windows, the same have been run, but for Windows. Here, one step has been ignored. Okay. And under each step, you can get the logs. So everything that happened here under the build and install step, you have the logs of the build and install for this pull request on Windows. Okay. So let's move on with the general things. Let me here. So how does all these things work? Everything goes through a simple file. At least on the examples that I will show you, everything goes through one file, only one. But basically, you can do what you want. If you want to separate the builds into multiple files, you can. But to keep things as simple as possible, I like to put everything in one file. So the idea is that the file that I call often ci.yaml, the file is what we call a workflow. Okay. In the workflow has a name. The workflow has some triggers. So here on this example, the triggers are the pull requests and the push. So every time a push is done on master, for example. Yeah.
Are those keywords or those on? They're keywords from GitHub?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So there is a very, very complete documentation as usual with GitHub. So you can maybe I can show you how it's done. Here I shouldn't have done that. For workflow on here. Here you have everything that's you can tell in your workflow. So there are a lot of things that you can do, as you can see here. There are a lot of things that you can do in a workflow. And for example, on the on here, it redirects you to another page. Basically, with these 2 pages, you can understand everything that happens in a workflow. And here you can see that there are some events like pull requests here, like push. It's the basic ones, but you can also add some workflow, what is called workflow dispatch. If you put this, for example, workflow dispatch here under the on, it will permit you to manually trigger the workflow. So there are a lot of ons, and everything is in the documentation.
Thanks.
After that, after specifying the general things of your workflow, you can specify jobs. So what is a job? It's a succession of steps. So it's just here to help you organize things. On each job, you can specify what is the machine that is running. So you can have multiple configurations in a single workflow if you use several jobs. Basically, in my examples, I also use only one job because it's simpler like that. So I use always one workflow, and in this one unique workflow, I use one unique job to do everything. Because one job means one machine. So if you put several jobs in a workflow, on the second job, you will have to reconfigure the machine and the dependencies and everything, okay? So it's simpler to have one job, at least to begin and to get started, so that you will do the dependency configuration things just once. And the most important thing is the step. So in the job, you have as many steps as you want, okay? One step means doing one thing. You can do everything is in one step if you want, but it will be very messy. One step, like we saw here, one step is one thing that is under a title here. So this is one step, this is one step. So basically, we use the steps to organize the run, what will happen. Okay, so do not hesitate to abuse the number of steps in your workflow because it will be very, very clear what is happening and not do just one step doing everything. And the little subtlety is what is called action, because we often speak about GitHub Action, but actually what we do is workflows, okay? So everything here, it's a workflow, it's not an action. An action is something that is reusable, something that has been defined by someone else somewhere else, and that you use as a step. So it's just like an interface that you will use as a step. You can put some parameters to the action. It has inputs and outputs. When you will become a power user of GitHub Actions, you will also be able to define your own actions if you want. But basically, when we speak about GitHub Actions, actually, we speak about writing workflows, not actions. We use actions. Okay. So what happens, or how does it happen? The pull request typical use case is that I want on each pull request on my project for each platform and for all the version of Sofa that I want. So it can be just master, but it can be also some older releases. What will happen is that a GitHub runner is created. So I will do this one step by step. It will be clearer. So the basic definition of on each pull request for each platform and for the version of Sofa I want is defined by 2 lines in your workflow. We will see it right after. Then a GitHub runner is created, so it's basically a virtual machine that is hosted by GitHub. So you don't have, in most cases, you won't have to care about that. This is a big step. I want to set up all the dependencies and the environment for my plugin to be built. So in most cases, you don't have to install a lot of things, but still you always have something to do before the build starts. There are some tools and packages that are always installed by default once you have a GitHub runner. And there are also some things that you can do automatically with the action that I created for you. So we will talk about this a bit later. Then you check out your sources in your workflow. So this is done by a very basic action from GitHub directly. So it's like an official action, I'd say. You build and install your plugin as usual. So you know how to build your plugin. You should. And don't forget to install it because it's very important for the testing phase. And then you run your tests if you have some. I hope you do. And for the push, so this was for the pull requests. And for the pull request, like I said before, you won't have to worry about the status check. It will be automatically updated. So this is the GitHub magic. And for the push, the only thing that is different is that you will be able, or I advise you to add a step just for the push event that will deploy binaries in a release, so that whenever there is a push that is done on a branch, on master, or on any branch of your project, there will be a build as usual, but there will also, at the very end, there will be a deploy binaries step that will create a release automatically for you, and so that you will always be able to say to anyone, go on my GitHub project, there are binaries of the plugin. There are binaries for the 21.6 branch, there are binaries for the master branch, and you won't actually have to worry about that unless it fails, and you will be warned if it fails. So yeah, this is what I just said. And again, it is done with a very few lines. Okay, so concrete example of this in Sofa Python 3. So maybe we won't get right away into the workflow, how it's written, but just to show you, here in the releases of Sofa Python 3, there is a master release. So this release has been automatically generated by the workflow. The idea is that we are able to build Sofa Python 3 master version for Sofa Master, and also, if we want, for Sofa 21.6, for Sofa 21.12, for Sofa, any Sofa. Okay, and for the pull requests and the status checks, we saw it just before. So I guess it's time now to get into the file itself. So don't get scared. Wait a sec here. Sofa Python 3. So don't get scared. It's pretty big, but if we do step by step, you will see that there is a lot of things that just are copy pasted and repeated, and some other things that can be just ignored because you won't actually need them for your case. So when you want to create a workflow, you have to create a .github folder at the root of your project. In this folder, you will have to create a workflows folder. And in this folder, you will put your workflows. So here we have two workflows. Let's ignore this one, and let's check this one, the ci.yaml, like I said before. So the idea here is that we want to build Sofa Python 3 on every pull request, on every, maybe it's not big enough. Here, can you see?
It's perfect here, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So we want to build Sofa Python 3 for every pull request, for every push, so for every merge in master, basically. And also, I added the workflow dispatch to be able to manually trigger the builds. If you want, I can show you after how to manually trigger a build. I have only one job, and it's the build and test. I guess. No, maybe there is another job, but no, I think it's the only one, the build and test. So this job is called run on. Here there is the matrix ID. Okay, so I will just explain this right after. The build runs on. Here is the matrix again. And here is how the matrix is defined. The idea is that I want to specify everything in one file because I don't want to rewrite stuff. So I create a matrix that will take all the values, all the combinations possible. Okay, so I have two axes in my matrix. So here, when the workflow runs, it will run with all the combinations possible. So Ubuntu plus master, macOS plus master, Windows plus master. Here, I'm lucky because I have only one dimension here. But if I have others, it will do all the combinations.
Guillaume,
Yeah.
it means that if a new, for instance, a plugin, I'd like to make sure that there is actually new binaries on top of the CI for like pull request and so on, but that for every release, I'm getting a binary version of my plugin for a specific version of Sofa, a release of Sofa, like the one of 2020, the one of 2019, and so on. I just need here to add one Sofa branch because the release will be on one branch, and it will automatically add the whole pipeline since you are working with the matrix.
If you add another version of Sofa here, it will mean that for every run of this workflow, so for every pull request and for every push, the build will be done not only with Sofa master, but also with the Sofa that you specified.
Okay, okay, okay.
At the beginning, we had two versions of Sofa here, but here we are on Sofa Python 3 master. We are on the master branch of Sofa Python 3. And actually, there have been some changes in Sofa Python 3, and we are not able anymore to build Sofa Python 3 master with Sofa 21.6. So we had to remove the 21.6 here. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, yes. So it's not exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So
It's not it,
you're
but it's the idea that the extension of what you just said, because the idea is that obviously you want here to have as much version of Sofa as possible, of course, because you want to test your plugin upon all the Sofa versions that you can. But also, obviously, your plugin at some point will not be able to build with old Sofa. So when your plugin grows and grows, you will have to remove some old Sofa versions from here because your plugin won't be able to build with old Sofa, and that's normal. It's
and
normal.
yeah, and let's say that I have master, which is compatible with masters of Sofa, and
Mm-hmm.
master of and sorry, and a branch named 2020 of my plugin, which is compatible with the same branch in Sofa.
Yeah.
Would that mean that just it's on the branch of
Yes.
my
Exactly.
plugin that it's the difference? Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. Cool.
Here, if I switch, so I want to see the same workflow, but not on the master branch, but on the 21.6.
Mhm.
Here you can see that the 21.6 he is tested with master and 21.6.
Oh, smooth. Okay, cool.
Okay,
That's nice.
so let's go back to the master one and let's continue. So the matrix, it's basically a simple combination stuff. So that you only specify everything in one place and you don't have to rewrite stuff. And then there is the real things, the steps. So the steps are the first step is the one that I did for you. So you can reuse this on all your workflows. So it's the Sofa setup action. So it's an action that I built. And the idea of this action is that it will set up Sofa and some dependencies for you automatically. So you won't have to worry about that. All you have to do is put some parameters, say what you want, where do you want your Sofa to be installed, which version of Sofa do you want, and it will install it for you. Okay, so if you want, we can also go into this project, and I can show you how it is done, or at least what can it do. But basically, all you have to know is that there is a magic step that you can use, which is called Sofa Framework Sofa Setup Action. Okay, here there is a version. You can use the latest, or you can stick to one version. And with this magic step, you will have, after this magic step, you will have Sofa and some dependencies like Python, maybe Eigen, and other things. Second step, I check out my code. So this also is something that you always copy and paste everywhere, because obviously you want to check out your code. So you just copy paste this. The only tricky things here and here are the variables. So when you see that, it means that we are using a variable from GitHub that is called workspace. So basically it means the path of the workspace / Sofa. So it's where I want to install my Sofa. Here I'm using the variable from the matrix that is called Sofa branch. So if you understood what I said before with the matrix, you understand that this will have the value of here, this. So it will always be master, but it could be another branch if you put some other branches here. Okay. And here it's a bit more tricky because it's an environment variable that has been setted for you by this. So this env workspace src path will not exist before this, because it's this action that will set environment variables for you. So it's not only set up Sofa and install things, it will also set up environment variables so that you can reuse them after. Okay. All the things that are done by this action are specified in the project in Sofa framework / Sofa setup action. I put it everything in a chart here. So here you have all the inputs that you can put on the action, in the action, and you have all the outputs as environment variables that you will be able to have to get to check after the action is executed. Okay. So for example, here we just saw that I'm using the workspace src path, and it's here, the workspace src path. It's the source, the path of the sources in my workspace. So it's basically what it just says. Okay, so we are still in Sofa Python 3. So what do I want after setuping Sofa and getting my source code? I want to set up PyBind. So this is very Sofa Python 3 specific. So I won't get into details, but basically it's a step that will set up PyBind. Okay. Then there is a cache step. So there are several cache steps. You can use a cache mechanism in GitHub Actions, but I suggest we just skip this idea for now, because it's not required to understand that now. You will do it once you are a power user. For now, you just ignore this. We install PyBind on PyBind 11. So, okay, we can ignore that. Again, some cache stuff. Let's ignore that. And now the thing that I'm really interested in, it's the step that will build and install my plugin. So here, I must have all the environments, all the dependencies, and everything clean. clean and set. Because what I will do here is trigger CMake with all the option and build my plugin. So if you read this carefully, you will see that it's basically the same thing that is done twice, because there is the Windows case and there is the other case, as usual. So let's focus on the other case, because for the Windows case, it's basically the same, except that we called this this monster before, just to set up some Visual Studio stuff. So let's focus on the other case. Well, you should know what you're seeing here because you're doing it every day. So we go into the build path. There is some cache stuff again, but you can ignore. We call CMake with all the options we want. So there are a lot of options because it's Sofa Python 3, but maybe for your plugin, there will be one or two options that you will pass to CMake. We call Ninja install, and basically that's it. These two steps are also ignorable. And then we are done. The build and the install is done. So basically here, at this line, or maybe more at the 132, the build and install is done. And if you just stick to this, you will have CI. You will have a workflow that triggers at every pull request and every push, and that builds your plugin. Okay, it does nothing with the build, it does nothing more, but at least you test your builds. And that's already something, because you will see if the build fails. And there is nothing more to do. So after that, what we want to do is to use the artifact feature so that we will be able to get the results of the build if we want, but it's not mandatory. So you can do this or you can ignore this. It's as you want. But basically, it's a very simple step just to, it's like making a save of the build result. So what I do is I take my install path and I transform it, I upload it as an artifact. And right after, I reinstall it into another path just to test the mechanism. And then the tests for my plugin. So again, there are a lot of Sofa Python specific things like library path things and Python path. But what I do here is just a set of shell commands, and at the end I just run my tests. It's right after, because I separated it into two steps, because I did one step just to set up the environment for tests, and I did another step to actually do the tests. So like I said before, do not hesitate to abuse steps because it's easier to debug. And then, so this is actually another step just to do some checks. So I check, I ls everywhere just to make sure that everything is in place, everything is okay. And then I have one step per test. So here there is a step that will just run a test. Here another step that will just run a test, etc., etc. So in Sofa Python 3 we have 1, 2, 3, 4 test executables. So 4 tests, 4 steps that will just execute the test, each one.
What is the steps so far outputs.exe?
So this will be empty or .exe. It is a way to just avoid making if Windows I want to execute sofa test.exe, else I want to execute sofa test, because on Windows you have .exe extension and on the other you don't
I
have
got
any
it.
extension.
Sorry. Yeah, thanks.
But the question is actually very interesting because I didn't speak about how to get the outputs of the SOFA setup action. I said that the SOFA setup action will set for you some environment variables. So we saw that before, how to get an environment variable. You do the same like this,
with
but
env.
you say env dot and the name, okay? But the SOFA setup action not only sets some environment variable, but it will also set some outputs, so direct outputs. And to get those outputs, it's this way. Steps dot the ID of the step. So if you scroll above, you will see that the ID of the step, the SOFA setup action step is SOFA. So steps.sofa.outputs dot the name of the output. And again, if you go to the documentation of SOFA setup action here, you will see that I said that there are some outputs as environment variables. So they are all here, but there are also some outputs as objects. So these are the outputs that you can get directly with this mechanism, steps.sofa.outputs. So you have two ways to get the outputs. It's basically the same at the end, so you can use whatever you want. But if you prefer to use this, you can use this. If you prefer to use the environment, you can use the environment. It's as you wish. I'd say that this way is very, very clear that you are using the output of the SOFA step. While the other, it's you just saying you're using an environment variable, but it's not very clear that it's from the SOFA setup action. So as you want. So that's it for the testing phase. And then there is, so it's another job. Yes, it's another job. So I lied. We have two jobs. There is another job. So the first job was build and test, I think. Yes. So the first job was build and test, which basically does what it says. It builds and tests. And the first job is deploy. So as I said before, when you create a new job, you have to say again what is the machine. So it can be tricky because if you want to do things that are directly the following up what has been done in another job, you will have to redo all the configuration stuff. So I really advise you to just do everything in one job. But here I don't need to redo all the configuration stuff because all the things I want to do is to get the artifacts and to upload them as a release. So this is why creating the artifacts was important here. Here, for SOFA Python 3, creating the artifact, not really installing it, but creating the artifact is very important because we will use this artifact to create a release right after. In your plugin, you don't have to create automatically binaries and releases, but it's so powerful and it's so cool to have releases and binaries automatically generated for you at each push in master or in any branch that really you shouldn't avoid these few lines. So in this job, all I do is get the artifact, zip them, and upload them as a release. And as you can see here I use an action from GitHub. So all the actions prefixed by actions are official actions. And here I use the action from a guy that is called softprops, and that will do what I want for me. I don't have to reinvent everything at each time. And that's basically it for the big lines of the SOFA Python 3 workflow. So do you have questions on this workflow? Do you have an idea of how you could apply this on your plugin? Or is it really not clear for now?
Yeah, I have a question more about. I could see with your exe stuff for Windows. It's nice, but it reminded me that you don't support debug builds and stuff like that.
Yes, that's true. So there could be in the matrix
Yes, that was
another axis to specify release and debug.
okay.
So you would have to rethink everything just to add the debug ID, but there won't be a lot of changes to do.
Thanks.
Just a short question about the at v3, v2, and so on. So it means we need to keep updated. So I know I was aware of what it was because you showed me a script and you explained me that there was actually several versions of it and you can keep version of those files. And I guess it's the same for the one from GitHub that you pointed out
exactly.
down here. Okay.
Yeah, here, for example, is I guess it's the most used action of all the GitHub Actions because it's the checkout one. It's at v12. It has been at v12 for as long as I can remember. But if there was some changes done in this action, in this project, there would be another tag, maybe v3. I don't care actually because I know that my v2 will always do what I want.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
Here on mine, if you use it, maybe in a few weeks I will have done some changes also, and it will be at v4 maybe with new inputs, with new outputs. It will be up to you to decide if you want to upgrade or not. But the v3 will always do the same thing.
And I have another question. It would be I'm a bit obsessed by this question of I would say not master, but for making binary version of and releasing the binary version of stable branches like you showed here 2106. What does it mean if I want so if I set up that in using the script as you showed? So that I generate one binary because would it mean that as soon as I create the branch, it would directly generate? No, I need to make a push to trigger that, right?
So you have the choice. I hope I understood correctly your question, but
It was not very clear. Sorry.
what you want is to. The question was,
Yeah.
how do I trigger the build and more importantly the binary generation for a branch like 21.6, for example.
Yeah.
So you have the choice. If you have already the workflow in the branch, for example, it's the case here in 21.6, I do have the workflow.
Yeah.
And it's basically the same, except that there is also the SOFA 21.6 that will be generated. If you already have it, and so you just have to push in the branch. So basically, if you are working correctly, you did a pull request on your project. The pull request get merged into master, and then you cherry pick the commit done into master into the 21.6. And when you do this cherry pick, it will trigger this workflow that will do everything. But if you don't have the workflow on the branch yet, it should not happen. You will have the workflow on the branch, so it will be done automatically. But it can happen that you have the branch with the workflow, but you did something wrong, like we did maybe 2 weeks ago, and you had to remove the binaries, and you want to regenerate them without having to push in the branch. So this is also possible thanks to this trigger, the workflow dispatch. So because there is this trigger in my workflow, I have the right to manually trigger a build. How to do that? I go into Actions. I select the right workflow, so it's the one called CI. Here it tells me this workflow has the workflow dispatch event trigger. So I have the right to run it. And actually I will do it right away. Oh, I did it a bit earlier. I will do it again here. And I have to select the branch on which it will be run. I select the 21.6 and I click run. I just wait a few seconds and it will appear here. Here it comes. So here the CI workflow has been triggered manually for the 21.6 branch. And as you can see, the matrix is big because we have 2 versions of master and the three systems. So a lot of combinations. Does that answer the question?
Precisely.
And at the end, if everything goes well, what I want is that the deploy artifact job. So as you can see here, we have our 2 jobs. The first is build and test. It's a matrix job, so it's a bit different in the way it's shown. And the second is the deploy artifact job. The deploy artifact will be run after the build and test. And when the deploy artifact will be run, it will create a new release here in my releases, a new release for the 21.6. So here I should have master and 21.6 with binaries. Are there other questions? So maybe
I have a question, but specific to some plugins.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So I think I got the general idea, but if your plugin happens to depend strongly, for instance, on another plugin such as Sofa Python 3,
yeah,
I guess you have in your YAML file to specify that, for instance, you want to set up Sofa, and then you want to set up Sofa Python 3 before building your plugin. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And so this is when it becomes a bit tricky, because I do it for you with Sofa, but you won't see it. All the get the dependency, get Sofa at the right version and everything. But you could have to do it also yourself if you are, in this case, as you said, with a plugin depending on another plugin. And there are several ways of dealing with that, but the simplest that comes to my mind is that to first making sure that the plugin you're depending on already has some CI and CD, so already has some GitHub Actions, so that it already generates some binaries. And then when you trigger a build on your big plugin, your big plugin will not have to build the small one, but just to get the binaries.
Okay.
Basically, this is what happens with Sofa. When you use the Sofa setup action, it will not build Sofa, obviously, because it would be too hard for the GitHub runner. What it does is that it fetch the latest Sofa binaries that has been generated by the Jenkins CI. So there is a bit of delay between when a new feature has been added in SOFA and when it is available in those binaries, obviously, because we don't generate those binaries every time. We do it once a day. So it's quite an okay delay, but you have to take it to keep it in mind that when you're running a build, a plugin build, the SOFA that is used is not the SOFA from 5 minutes ago. It's the SOFA from yesterday.
Yeah, okay.
And obviously, if you're getting the SOFA 21.6, there is no question. It's the usual.
Okay.
So yes, if you have plugins depending on another plugin, you have to do this binary things yourself. But actually, it's quite straightforward. Once you understood how to do it once, you just have to do it from the most far plugin in your dependency tree. You do this one first, and then you go up and up and up until you have your big plugin that is depending on everything. And this one should be able to get some binaries.
Yeah, okay.
Shall we start? Shall we start working on your examples? Do you have an idea of what you want to? Which plugin do you want to work on? If you have none, I can give you some.
Felix, Camille, maybe Robin. Robin, maybe it's more. Yeah, maybe actually could work as well for your deep physics plugin. I guess would be a bit different, of course, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, nothing is to be compiled, but for testing, for stuff like that, could be done.
Maybe I have a question. Sorry, maybe you say it, but how do you know what kind of virtual machine setup you can have?
Sorry, I don't hear you very well.
Okay. Sorry, I was saying, how can you know the type of virtual machine you can get from GitHub? Setting,
what do you mean by the type?
I mean,
the specs?
Yes. For example, if we want to do some GitHub action for SOFA CUDA, is it possible to have a GPU, for example?
The specs are specified on the documentation. So GitHub Action, runner, specs. Here about GitHub hosted runners. So here are the specs for the hardware resources. And if you want to get some GPU related things, I'm not sure you will be able to rely on the GitHub hosted runner. But with GitHub Actions, you can also have your own custom runner.
Okay.
So I never tried it, but it's completely feasible. All you have to do is to connect the machine, your own machine, with GitHub, the workflow, through an authentication token, like as usual. It's always the same ID. So you have to run a small script on your custom machine, and it will connect itself on your workflow.
And the GitHub runner are totally free.
Sorry?
It's totally free, the service.
Yeah. You have a limit of how many builds you can trigger by day, I guess, something like that. But it's huge.
Okay.
It's very big because people are using this for very
unit
what do I
test.
say?
Yeah.
Basic stuff.
Yeah. Small test. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, very small test, and they use huge matrices. So it's often they trigger a lot of runs that all are done in maybe 10 seconds.
Okay.
So that's why the limit is high.